Impacts of early literacy intervention on high school literacy proficiency. Hi, my name is Hannah Weller, and I am an ESOL teacher at Cloud Elementary in Wichita, Kansas. I've taught ESOL now for 5 years, and I was a second grade teacher before that. I've taught a total of 11 years. And I wanted to start off with a question. Did you know that students who are not proficient readers by 3rd grade are less likely to graduate high school? So really thinking about that statement and how students need to be proficient readers so that they can be successful in high school and beyond really starts at a much earlier age than 3rd grade even. So I wanted to look at how intervention and early literacy intervention can really impact learning in later grades and beyond. In this presentation, I will illustrate 3 different scenarios of students who are intervened with at various times and grades and show the impact this can have on their literacy achievement. I will also give background, theory, and research related to the importance of early literacy intervention. So to start off, here are my students, my scenarios of John, Sam, and Kim. So John is a struggling reader that was flagged in kindergarten. He was given Tier 3 intervention starting in 1st grade. Sam is also a struggling reader flagged in 2nd grade, and he was given Tier 3 intervention starting in 2nd grade. And Kim was a struggling reader that was flagged in 1st grade. She has great work ethic and work habits. She did qualify for a Tier 3 intervention, but not placed in Tier 3 group because there were not enough spots for all of the students that were needing Tier 3 intervention. And I used our protocol to determine, Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3 that we use with USG 259, Wichita Public Schools. So that's where I started off with that. So then I broke it down a little bit more into actual hours. Here again, you'll see John, Sam, and Kim. And I wanted to see how many hours of instruction they would get in a typical year, actually 3 years, starting in kindergarten. So all of kindergarten, all of 1st grade, and all of 2nd grade. So 3 years total. As you can see, all 3 of them get the same hours of core instruction of 894 hours of core instruction. All students get that, all students get that all 3 years. But where the hours differ is their levelized intervention when they're placed in those tier groups. John will get the most because he was placed in a Tier 3 group earlier. He got 404 hours for a total of nearly 1,298 or close to 1,300 hours. Sam, he was placed in a Tier 3 group not until second grade, yes. So he got 1,226 hours, or 72 less than John did. And Kim, she was qualified for Tier 3, but unfortunately could not be placed in a Tier 3 group. So she was put in Tier 2 because she was pretty close to Tier 2 kids. So she got 258 hours of levelized instruction for a total of 1,152 hours. So she got 146 less hours of literacy instruction than John did. And again, I used our instructional calendar to figure this data with our framework for how many minutes we have to spend on literacy instruction in a day, and our protocols that are given to us by our district. So 150 hours, that's the difference between John and Kim. When I thought about that, I couldn't really believe that it was that much, and it kind of really surprised me. 150 hours of literacy instruction in 3 years is the difference. So with intentional, precise intervention in place that are delivered at the appropriate time and in the appropriate settings, this difference of nearly 150 hours can make a huge impact on students' achievement and proficiency. So, early and intense interventions are key. Intervening in primary grades during core and levelized intervention times will set students up for more success in high school and beyond. So how could I prove this? These are my connections to my research. So this first study here is by Stanley, Pretcher, and Katz. It shows a direct relationship was found between how students performed on kindergarten literacy skills and how students perform on 10th grade literacy skills. So this study found that students who were proficient in kindergarten on phoneme segmentation, letter naming fluency, nonsense word fluency, and vocabulary are more likely to be proficient in 10th grade on reading comprehension skills. So I think that as a primary educator myself and mainly working with kindergarteners and first and second graders, we need to remember that these kids that we're working with, if they are proficient in these basic skills of phoneme segmentation, and they know their sounds and can put those sounds together in a very proficient way in kindergarten, first and second grade, that will help set them up for more success and better reading comprehension in high school. Another connection to research is an article I found by Hoover and Temner. And this quote that I want to share is from that study. It says, "Consider children who do not possess sufficient levels of mastery on these foundational skills during these early states of learning to read and who are not provided with explicit instruction where needed to develop them, especially those pertaining to the development of decoding. Such children will be forced to rely increasingly on ineffective literacy learning strategies to identify unfamiliar words in text. They could use picture cues, partial visual cues, and contextual guessing. The continued use of these ineffective compensatory strategies will inevitably lead to literacy learning difficulties." So if we are not teaching decoding skills and are not helping students develop them at a proficient rate in early grades, they will not be able to, decode words when they get to harder text in upper elementary, middle school, and high school. And this will, affect their reading comprehension. And that's, what is considered proficient or not proficient by the time you get to high school. So we have to build, automaticity with decoding and these basic foundational skills to set students up for success later. Another article I wanted to share was written by Foreman, Dombeck, and Smith, and there were 7 key elements that were identified that schools and teachers must consider when giving primary students literacy interventions. So the 7 elements are listed here. You can see it says that there's an importance of researcher and practitioner partnerships. It talked about how, researchers or practitioners or teachers need to use research-based programs, and they need to have good partnerships with those teachers so that the students and teachers have good buy-in in these programs that they're using. Using something that's research-based is very important. Number 2 said determining the need for early intervention. So you need to flag these students using a screener or some type of diagnostic test, and that also kind of goes with assessment and data. You have to find the students early that need this intense intervention. And then you also, number 4, talks about evaluating curriculum and instructional materials. You have to have the right curriculum and materials to use to intervene with students. Number 5 talks about scheduling time for intervention. And that looks different, maybe based from building to building, based on building needs and district protocols and things like that. But that time has to be set apart. And this says intervention, but you also need to remember that core is important, and you need to, protect your core time and really use have the least amount of interruptions as possible during these key literacy times so students are getting the most amount of literacy instruction that they can get. Number 6 says that you need to select, train, and support interventionists. You could have just interventionists in a building, but that can also look different building to building. You can use maybe paraprofessionals, you can use teachers. You need to have them trained though, and they need to be supported in the work that they are doing. And number 7, it talks about locating space and maintaining open communication among interventionists, teachers, and parents. And everyone needs to be on the same page, working together for the same goal, for these students that they're working with, to really get the most growth out of these students. So in conclusion, school leaders must provide early intervention with sufficient intensity and duration to accelerate students' growth. So you have to find those students early. You have to provide sufficient and intense intervention, to really get to them. If you wait too long, it's going to be too late, and they will be less likely to be proficient readers later on in high school and beyond. Now I wanted to give my connections with literacy theory from our book. I found that the parallel distributed processing model really connected well with this idea of early intervention being key, because this model talked about that there's 4 processors in the brain. There's context, meaning, orthographic, and phonological. And students in primary grades must develop a solid foundation in orthographic and phonological processors so they can become proficient readers who easily use and apply all 4 of these processors in their brains. We don't expect kindergartners to be able to do all of this and use all 4 processors in their brains to really read really proficiently, but we have to start laying the foundation for the orthographic and phonological processors in early grades so that students can really have those solid foundational skills and use all 4 parts to become proficient readers. Down here it says students who struggle in these areas must be intervened with early when these concepts are readily taught and instructed on. You don't see a whole lot of phonological awareness instruction happening in 3rd, 4th, 5th grade and beyond. So students who are not understanding these skills, especially phonological awareness and phonics, need to be intervened with early as possible. So here is another example in connection to literacy theory. I use the simple view of reading, and that's basically, simply put, that word recognition times language comprehension equals reading comprehension. So our end goal is for students to be accurate and deep with their reading comprehension. To do so, the students must have a thorough and deep understanding of the following foundational skills that make up the simple view of reading. So word recognition is really made up of things like decoding and phonological awareness, along with the fluency. And the language comprehension part is more the oral comprehension and language reasoning. But all of these together are multiplied by each other. So if there's a deficit in one of these areas, it's going to show up here at the end, and the reading comprehension is not going to be where it needs to be. And a strong foundation in phonological awareness, decoding, and fluency must be present for reading comprehension. And again, the phonological awareness and decoding are mostly work done in early and primary grades. So we need to really make sure our students are proficient in these skills before they get to 3rd grade. So in conclusion here, I want you to remember our students that I gave the scenarios with earlier. There's John, Sam, and Kim. Remember, John was intervened with earliest at the appropriate tier early, and he had the most instructional hours. And Sam was intervened with tier 3 instruction in 2nd grade, and he had the middle number of instructional hours. And Kim was intervened with, but not at the appropriate tier, and she had the least instructional hours. So we all need to remember to work to find more struggling readers and struggling students earlier and intervene appropriately with them, like was done so with John. This will help set students up for literacy success in 3rd grade, high school, and beyond. And here's my references that I used for my presentation and my paper. Thank you so much for your time.